Hi, everybody. Come on in. Come on in. We have a very, very special day today with you. Very excited. Keep coming in. Hi, everybody. Keep coming. Today's a very special day. Good. Keep coming in. We still have people coming in. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Keep coming. So great to see you all here. I'm so glad you came. We have a wonderful town hall planned for all of you. We're going to get started soon. We still have people coming in. We have over 100 of our colleagues here today. Thank you so much for coming. So let me just ask Dr. Day. There you are. Are you ready?
We are ready.
Okay. I'm so excited to have all of you here today. There is a wonderful program planned. Your colleagues put together an amazing program. Our social sciences faculty, Professor Clark, Professor Selassie, and Professor Jackson are here to share their wisdom and their knowledge and their information with all of us today. And I found it myself to be incredibly enriching, and I'm very, very excited that we have this program put together for you to talk about our third in our series of Black Lives Matter on Juneteenth. So I'm not going to take a lot of time because this program is so valuable, but I'll come on at the end and give you a little bit more information. So I'm going to give it back to you, Dr. Day.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to today's town hall meeting, Black Lives Matters, Part 3, a Juneteenth celebration, the abolition of slavery. We're very excited today to have the opportunity to share some of our African-American culture with you. We are excited that the social sciences professors are here, the staff will be participating. We want to give you a piece of us and have you join in with us to share with us how the African-American culture has impacted your life. Today, we have other presenters on, as well as the social sciences department. We have special guests, Raven and Jacqueline Garcia, who will be singing the national anthem, the Black national anthem. We have Ray Garcia, Regina Smith, We will have a special ceremony led by Dr. Sadia Porche. The staff members participating are Camille Duncan, Aline Beard, Cheryl Smiley, Andrea Eke, and of course we have a very special presentation by David Ford, who is an LACC Foundation member and our community partner from Southern California Edison. So let's get started with the town hall meeting. And now I turn the program over to Dr. Sadia Porche, who will be leading us in the Juneteenth celebration. Dr. Porche.
Thank you, Dr. Day. It is fitting to open the ceremony with the traditional ritual of asking our elders for permission to begin. So those of you who consider yourselves elders, do we have permission to begin? Elders, please respond by saying, yes, we give our permission.
Yes, we give our permission.
Thank you. In the spirit of unity and culture, we are going to open this discussion with a ritual. A ritual within the Emoja context is a ceremony or practice that allows us to connect with each other and pay respect to our ancestors and those who have paved the way before us. Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, you may be muted. Okay. Today, we are paying respect and welcoming the presence of those who have lost their lives recently due to COVID-19 and our brothers and sisters who have lost their lives due to the unconscionable murders that have ignited a wave of protest against racial injustices in our nation, and to our ancestors that fought over 400 years ago against the enslavement and for the freedom of Black people. We each have a glass of water that will be poured into a bowl after each name is read. We will say the word Ashe, meaning so be it, after we pour the libation. Dr. Smith, you may proceed. In Dr. Smith's place, I pour a libation and pay respect to Kabwe Chanda, our admired, loved, trusted, and respected IT regional manager. I pour the libation, and we all say, Ashe.
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 We pay respect to Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old daughter and sister, an emergency medical technician and first responder. Ashe.
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 We pay respect to Ahmaud Arbery, a 27-year-old son and brother and recently enrolled college student at South Georgia Technical College with dreams to become an electrician.
Ashe.
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 We pay respect to George Floyd, a 46-year-old father, son, brother, and a friend, referred to as a gentle giant who was caring and wanted to make a difference in the lives of others. Ashe.
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 We pay respect to Richard Allen, a preacher, abolitionist, former slave, and educator. Ashe.
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 We pay respect to Ella Baker, a civil rights activist who did not let her gender stop her from defending her race. Ashe.
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 We pay respect to Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old son whose murder sparked the beginnings of the Black Lives Matter movement. We pour libation in his honor. Ashe.
Ashe.
These are only a few African Americans that have influenced our lives in history. We honor and respect them. And all presenters say Ashe.
Obviously, I think it's a great idea. I would like to see us support it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I would love to see our district support it.
We now, at this time, return the session back to Dr. Thelma Day.
Thank you, Dr. Porche, and all of you who participated in the special Juneteenth celebration. As I said earlier, it's important for us to have you understand the African American culture. So now I'm going to invite Dr. Gabriel Selassie, who will share with us the history of the Juneteenth celebration. Dr. Selassie.
Ooh, I needed to unmute myself. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen, right? Hello?
We can.
Okay, so hello, Dr. Day. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So I'm going to be covering just some very fundamental basics of Juneteenth, and I'll try to get this under 10 minutes. So if I'm speaking really quickly, you'll have to forgive me. Now, there's just a couple of things about the Juneteenth that are important, and this is a little bit of the back history, is that before the Juneteenth celebration really took hold in the United States, there were what we called Emancipation Day celebrations. And these Emancipation Day celebrations largely started around the mid-19th century when individual states began to emancipate their slaves, and those were typically slaves in the North. So for example, on July 4th of 1834, New York State emancipated its slaves, and people with Black folk and some white folks in that state began to celebrate Emancipation Day on that day, the same as July, our National Independence Day. In the West Indies, the British Empire freed slaves in all of their conquered territories. And so August 1st, 1834 became the day for people in the Caribbean to celebrate their emancipation. So what you ended up having is individual states in the North and then in the Caribbean celebrating some form of Emancipation Day on various days. There wasn't really one central date where that occurred until January 1st of 1863, when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And from the Civil War's end until about 1930s or so, Black people across America celebrated January 1st of each year as Emancipation Day. Now, these celebrations were quite unique in the sense that there were Blacks who came to give speeches. So if you sort of look up the history of Emancipation Day, you'll notice that presidents, notable Black people like Booker T. Washington would make the circuit, moving from town to town, giving these fundamental speeches about how Black people were dealing with both forms of overt and covert racism, and how the race itself was progressing towards those ideas of republicanism or Republican government. My own research on Emancipation Days here in the West, and particularly Los Angeles, reveals that Black people used these days to really demonstrate to themselves and to the greater American community that they were in fact Americans, and that they had inculcated those fundamental rights that we all considered to be the American ideals. So before there was Juneteenth, we have the Emancipation Day celebrations on January 1st of every year. So then the question is that where did Juneteenth come from? And before I get into its exact origins, I'm just going to trace a little bit of sort of the background and why Juneteenth was fundamentally important of a holiday, at least for the people in Texas. And this has to do with the kind of system of slavery that we had here in the United States that was called chattel slavery. Slavery was ubiquitous in the world, practiced by every group on the planet, pretty much. And what separated our slavery from, let's say, slavery in Africa was that once you were bound to someone, you became that person's personal property. So while you were a human being, in the eyes of the government or the legal system, you were a piece of property that could be bought and sold, and those property rights could be transferred from person to person. Now, why this is important is because it's the concept of private ownership that Americans have so thoroughly inculcated. And this is why we hear things, the idea of socialism, communism, the idea of the collective is such an affront to Americans, is because we hold on to this idea that Americans have the right to private property. So as I stated in the last presentation, is that one of the things that is just so fundamentally striking is that terrorist groups like the Klan, Knights of the White Camellia, the Red Shirts, what have you, could literally burn Black people out of their homes, but at the same time recognize that those Black people still retained their rights to the property that they themselves would have abandoned trying to escape the terror. So when the Civil War began, the question was what to do with slaves that these northern armies encountered as they moved throughout the South. One of the ideas was just to simply take them, free them, call them contraband, which is illegal goods. But other people feared that that was a strike against the concept of private property, private ownership. So people thought that if you just merely took a slave without some kind of legal means, is that you were depriving the slave owners of their fundamental right to property. Now, you have to remember here that once the Civil War ended, not a lot, but many of the slave owners went back to their plantations and were given their land back because it was illegal, hence, to take someone's property. So cleverly, Lincoln thought of an idea about how to sever this relationship between master and slave and cut off this argument for property rights. And that, of course, was the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, what's also has to be understood here is that today in the 20th century, we have all kinds of means of communication, social media, phones, etc. Back in the 19th century, there were just basically three ways that communication traveled. One was word of mouth, the other was by newspapers, and the third one was by telegraph. Newspapers and telegraph, and in some ways, word of mouth were all kind of disrupted through the Civil War. So the way that slaves heard that they were emancipated was northern armies would literally roll onto the plantations and stand before the slaves and the slave owners and literally read the Emancipation Proclamation and tell them that they were in fact free. But this did not happen in Texas. The Civil War ended on April 9th, 1865, and from there, the South was divided into territories. Union General Gordon Granger was given the command of the Texas District, and on June 19th, 1865, some 3 months after the war ended, Granger read General Order Number 3 in Galveston, Texas, and it said in part, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property," and there's the word property again, "between former masters and slaves, and the connection therefore existing between them becomes that between employer and free labor." So hence, why do we celebrate then Juneteenth? When I was an undergraduate going to Prairie View A&M University of Texas, back in the 1980s, When I got to campus, Juneteenth was declared a Texas state holiday. I had never heard of it. And for one, I couldn't understand why people would, in fact, celebrate a holiday for something that they heard after the war was over. I thought it was kind of strange and kind of unusual. But what I come to understand is that these Emancipation Day celebrations were a way for people to sort of acknowledge that while in many ways they were in fact legally free, they were still socially bound. And of course, after the Civil War with Plessy versus Ferguson, 1869 or 1896, we see the idea of segregation taking hold. So kind of what Juneteenth did for Texans was to kind of remind them that yes, legally free, but still socially bound. It's sort of like getting lemons and making lemonade in some sort of small way. Now, what's happened is that even though Juneteenth was being celebrated in Texas, Emancipation Day celebrations on January 1st were still being celebrated. But by the time we get to the Great Depression, Texans were leaving out of Texas en masse and taking with them Juneteenth celebrations throughout the United States. And then over time, as people began to rethink the relationship between Abraham Lincoln and whether Lincoln was really the great emancipator that he claimed to be, Juneteenth celebrations began to supplant Emancipation Day celebrations so that today we have Juneteenth as a state holiday in every single state except Hawaii, Montana, North and South Dakota. And there is talk today of making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Not so much with the current climate, whether or not that's going to happen, but there is talk about that happening. Now, if you're still interested in more about the Juneteenth celebration, I have a further podcast that talks about this in greater detail, and you can find that at thepeopleshistorian.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Selassie. We really appreciate you really helping us understand the purpose of the Juneteenth celebration. While we are celebrating Juneteenth today, we want everyone to know that it is important, but at the same time, the fight is still on for racial equality. Hear now from Professor Tony Clark, who will share that message.
Absolutely. We have a long way to go to reach equality. And we're seeing things right now on a daily basis that reminds us of that fact. Right now, of course, the focus is on the killings by police of African Americans, okay? But one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind is that police violence is just one area within the criminal justice system where Blacks face discrimination. And what I mean by the criminal justice system, I'm talking about the courts, the law enforcement, and the prisons, okay? That's just one area. I'd like to share with you the results of a recent Washington Post article that cited no less than 120 studies that found evidence of race disparities in the following areas: police and profiling, that's what we're talking about now, in misdemeanors, where we're talking about petty crimes and driver's license suspensions. The drug war, I think most of us is familiar with by now, the war on drugs has basically been considered a war against those in subordinate groups. Juries and jury selection, another area where they found disparities. The death penalty, prosecutors' discretion and plea bargaining, in all these areas, judges and sentencing guidelines. And also, last but not least, school suspensions and the school to prison pipeline. And one more. In prison, the incarceration and solitary confinement. They have found, these 121 studies found ample evidence of race disparities in the criminal justice system as they relate to these different parts of the criminal justice system. But by no means do we find that can we conclude that the criminal justice system is the only area where we need to make improvement. Right now, of course, we need not look any further than Colin Kaepernick. looking at sports, of course. Mr. Kaepernick had been calling attention to police violence. Now, although the NFL did blackball him, and that's no argument there, that act alone does not reveal the true level of bias against African Americans in the NFL. For instance, everybody is talking about what the NFL should do. Give him a job. But there's little discussion about the fact that as of 2019, for instance, 70% of all players are Black in the NFL, yet only 3% or 10%, but only 3 or 10% of that number are Black. And not coincidentally, among college football, there's 128 teams in Division I in the FBS. And when we look at that group, we find a similar ratio. Only about 10% of the coaches are Black when they're over 50% of the players in collegiate football Black. So those are some major disparities that really leads us to conclude there's so much work, there's so much progress that we need to make going further. How about in the area of the workplace? This is an area where we absolutely continue to see evidence of discrimination. For instance, a recent meta-analysis of field studies that was looked at field studies since 1989 found that workplace job discrimination is not diminishing, not at all. The results showed, this analysis showed that on average, whites, for instance, received 36% more callbacks than African Americans. And they also received 26% more callbacks than Latinos. And I just want to briefly share with you an example of one of these studies that has been done within this time period. And actually, it's a study that has been often cited in the literature, in the media. And it was done at the University of Chicago. And it had this really provocative research question. Are Emily and Greg more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal? Are Emily and Greg more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal? This study looked at the likelihood of receiving callbacks among these, of course, they were fictitious resumes, with names that either appeared to have white-sounding names as opposed to Black-sounding names. Suffice to say, what this study and other studies like that found was that those resumes, overall, those resumes with the white-sounding names had a 50% higher likelihood of being responded to than those resumes with the Black-sounding names. But more ominously, I would say, is that those, they constructed 4 different types of resumes. They constructed one group that was the high quality resumes with the Black sounding names and the low quality resumes with the Black sounding names. And then they had low quality resumes with the white sounding names and the high quality resumes with the white sounding names. What they found, believe it or not, that those resumes, those high quality resumes with the Black sounding names, those high quality resumes with the Black sounding names had less of a probability of having their resumes responded to than the low quality resumes with the white sounding names. Clear evidence of disparities or discrimination at the front before they even get into the building. So these are just some examples that clearly spell out the need that we need to be vigilant and continue to fight in support of making changes, because it's not just these institutions. We could look at health, we could look at education, we could look at so many other major institutions in society where we see significant and major disparities when it comes to African-American life. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Clark, for reminding us that the fight is not over, that we must continue to fight for equality for all. We will continue to share the African American culture with you. And now we have special guest artists who will come in and sing for us the Black National Anthem, a song that is very important to all African Americans. Please join me in welcoming Raven and Jacqueline Garcia.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, out in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat, yes, let our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that the years have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till knowing stand alive, where the light gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath the hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Well done, Jacqueline and Raven. Everyone, please join me in saluting them and thanking them for a great performance. Excellent. Thank you very much. You've heard the words and song. Now, I invite Professor Anika Jackson to share with us the meaning of the words and lift every voice and sing. Professor Anika Jackson.
So you just heard a beautiful rendition of the song, Lift Every Voice and Sing. It is soulful, celebratory, and powerful. Let me tell you about the song dubbed the Black National Anthem, which has broad appeal. It has been recited at formal political events, major concerts, and even festivals. The third verse of the song was cited verbatim at the benediction of President Obama's first inauguration. It was recently sung by Beyonce at Coachella. An all-star version of it was recorded by Anita Baker, Stevie Wonder, Gladys Knight, Dionne Warwick in 2012. And hip-hop artist Doughboy, the Midwest Maestro, and DJ Kool Rod completed a mashup of this song. Unlike the third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner, an American national anthem that celebrates the murder of Black Americans, former slaves, that dared to fight for their freedom, Lift Every Voice and Sing at its heart is about hope and calls us to remember the struggle of our ancestors for freedom, exalted in the Constitution, yet unavailable to Black Americans. A famous author and rabbi in 1928 aptly wrote that it was the noblest anthem ever heard. It represents a great upwelling of prayer from the soul of a race long wronged, but with faith unbroken. Let me summarize the voices of the song. The first verse opens with a command to optimism, praise and freedom. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. The second verse reminds us to never forget the suffering and obstacles of the past. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. The third and final stanza is about the challenges of the future. They are to be met with perseverance, courage, faith, and a trust in God. Thou hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path, we pray. Never heard, this song speaks to the universal quest for freedom. At the same time, it is a uniquely African-American experience, uniquely about the African-American experience. Never heard of this song? Not many Americans have. Unless you've attended a sporting event at a predominantly Black institution like a HBCU, or attended a school assembly at a predominantly Black primary or secondary school, or sung it as a hymn in church. You might ask yourself, who wrote this song that began as a poem? The song was written by James Weldon Johnson in 1909. It was written at an important time in history when Jim Crow was replaced by slavery. It was later adopted by the NAACP in 1919 as its official song. Lift Every Voice and Sing, as well as We Shall Overcome, were rallying cries during the Civil Rights Movement and have been sung by people seeking justice internationally. Today, Lift Every Voice and Sing is one of the most cherished songs. So listen up the next time that you're watching a protest for justice or participating in one. You might just hear the rallying cry, lift every voice and sing.
Thank you, Professor Jackson, for explaining the meaning of a very important song to us, Lift Every Voice and Sing. We said to you earlier that you would have an opportunity to share in our celebration. So I'm now going to turn over the town hall to Professor Naima Payne, who will lead us in the open dialogue.
Hello, thank you all for joining us today. You know, as I said in the student town hall and the faculty town hall, everyone has a different experience. And what we want to talk about today is how has the African American culture impacted you? And just to share just a few words, I'm an elder Gen X. I'm an elder Gen Xer. And my experience is a little bit different because I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley, and we didn't have a lot of African American Black students, you know, growing up. And so it took me a little longer to embrace such a beautiful culture, and just even, you know, my name, you know, so it's been challenging because, you know, if you're different, then you stand out. And so we would like to have you share how has the African American culture impacted you? And then Andrea, would you like to unmute yourself?
She was not able to join this particular session. Professor.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, Sadia. So if you could raise your hand, who would like to kind of share your experience on how African American culture has impacted you. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizbeth Gant Britton, African American Studies, and I'm so delighted and honored to be here with all of my colleagues and friends. I see so many faces of people that we have worked with over the years. And of course, I can remember President Gallagher hosting her event for all of us when she first joined us. And she gave every single person in a very long line a big hug. So we know that it takes a village to do anything, and definitely to change even one campus takes a huge and tremendous effort, not only on the campus, but also connecting within the district and the larger community. I just wanted to cite very quickly, as part of my contribution, a study, one of many, 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 as Dr. Clark has indicated. And just one of the examples for young African-American women is their feeling of self-esteem, their body image, things like that. And the study noted that those students who had taken courses in things like African-American studies, who had a grounding in their culture, had a strong sense of self-esteem, and even when confronted with microaggressions, did not exhibit shameful behavior. They were able to stand up to it. Because they already had a very strong and empowered sense of self. And so we can only, of course, we know what's going on with our students, but we can only imagine that in addition to the educational challenges, all of the other challenges that students have been experiencing, students of color, and in particular African-American students, are all of our efforts for them to be able to have this kind of foundation, which will not only see them through this immediate crisis, but will also be the core of their self-identity, which will allow them to go on and be successful not only for themselves, but also in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing. Would someone else like to take this time to share?
I'll speak. This is Regina. I just wanted, just as I reflect on this beautiful opportunity to be together and share, I'm reminded of my childhood during that period when there was civil unrest in the 60s. And I remember, first of all, I remember when my parents moved into our first house, they often reminded me that we were the first African-American family to live in our neighborhood. And so eventually, as I continued to go through elementary school, we saw what they called white flight, where all the neighbors left, and then all the African-American neighbors started coming in. And it just made you wonder, why? What's going on? What happened to my friend I was going to school with in elementary? You could see that the culture and shifts were changing. And during the civil unrest in the 60s, I remember my father having to have a pass, and he was telling my mom, I have to make sure I have my pass, because he wasn't allowed to drive around in LA without a note from his job that said that, because he worked a swing shift, a note from his job to allow him to go to work and come home. And so, you know, it just, and then I remember we went outside, and I remember seeing I don't know if they were called National Guards at the time, but I remember there were Jeeps in our neighborhood. And I remember there were men, young men with like, I want to say machine guns, but I think they were machine guns, these huge machine guns that were, you know, in the Jeep looking around, looking to shoot or do something, just roaming during that period of civil unrest. And so these memories these recent memories reminded me of some of the childhood memories I had during that civil unrest. And now where I live right down the street from where the Rodney King riots occurred. And now we're having this civil unrest. So I say that it just sparks a variety of emotions and just, you know, where we are. And for us to come together and to see now it's a different world, because during the 60s, you didn't see a lot of diversity in terms of people coming together to fight the cause. And now you look now currently during the civil unrest, you see everyone coming together, all the cultures and everyone. I know my father would really be pleased to see what has happened. My mom is, just to see how the world has changed and how we're coming together here and having this opportunity to have this great celebration and talk and lecture and knowledge, just sharing knowledge with each other. I think it's just a really great thing. So it just kind of reminds me of all the different experiences that I've had in my life as it related to the civil unrest and how we're coming together and it's changing. It's not like it was in the past. We're actually making some systemic changes and we're going to do something to make it different. So I'm really glad to be a part of the solution to make changes. And we have a great team of people that are coming together to make some things happen.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
I like to speak. I don't know if my voice is muted. Can I speak? Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, 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 you're up.
Okay. I would just like to say how oftentimes I have conversations with my father and my grandmother. My grandmother is 92 years old. She's from rural Arkansas. And so it never dawned upon me until I graduated from Pepperdine University in Malibu that when I was so excited about graduating, I said, Granny, I want you to come to my graduation. And she's like, baby, I don't go to Malibu. And I said, why? I was like, I'm in Malibu all the time. And so that's when it really hit me that her experiences are vastly different from mine. And so it wasn't until then that I began to truly appreciate the progress, but still to look at how much more needs to be done, because she still had that mindset in which she had been trained not to go outside of certain aspects or neighborhoods in California. And she didn't even migrate to California until the late 50s, early 60s, when they had the Great Migration in California. And she still, in 2017, had never been to Malibu, California, because of the things that she had experienced. And my father, he began to explain to me that, you know, Nairi, you're only 5th generation out of slavery. And I thought about that. And he's like, my great grandmother was a slave. And so it didn't really dawn on me till then when I said, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, to be able to graduate from an institution that was necessarily not for African Americans, and to understand the importance of being a Black female American and what that means to me, and the weight that I carry on my back for others that are coming after me. I take that very seriously. And I just want to say thank you all for being the African American community as a whole impacts me. It it allows me to understand my culture and my community as well. And I take all those experiences into the classroom and give it all I got.
Thank you for sharing, Nairi.
Wanda, may I?
Yes, please, Wanda. Thank you.
I think that my experiences, I was actually born in Waverly, Tennessee. And at the time, my first grade experience was to go to an all segregated school. What that meant at the time in Waverly, Tennessee, was that we had in the movie theaters where the Black people went upstairs and the white people went down. I was there for the Black only water fountains. Coming on a little bit later in that, I remember going into Walgreens to get ice cream or whatever, the Woolworths or whatever it was. I couldn't actually go, but how we had to get ice cream at the counter was one Black person could come in and they would hand the ice cream out the door to the rest of us because we were not allowed inside, only one at a time. That was my childhood experiences. I later moved to Detroit. When I moved to Detroit, they had these officers called the Big Four. The Big Four were 4 white police officers that patrol with rifles in the car. There was a lot of the reasons for the riots that came in Detroit. I also, when the federal troops came in, had an army tank sat in front of my house for 2 weeks. It's kind of hard for me to understand how things are really changing. I was told that if I became educated, that things would change. I thought that if I got into a good job, that things would change. I thought if I came to the community colleges, that things would change. I see a lot of what I saw in Waverly, Tennessee on this campus.
Thank you, Wanda. Thank you for sharing. Yes. I would like to take this time to turn it back to Dean Day.
Thank you, Professor Payne, and thank you all for sharing those very painful personal experiences. We do appreciate your contribution. And now we have a very, very special presentation from David Ford, who is our LACC Foundation member and community partner from Southern California, Edison. David.
Thank you so much, Dr. Day and Dr. Gallagher and the team that has put on these town hall meetings, and the dialogue has been so enriching. These past weeks have raised the consciousness of race relations here in this country from both private and public institutions. And one that I participate in, that I work for, is Southern California Edison. And this morning when I logged on to my email, I seen a email from our chairman and CEO of Edison and the president of Edison acknowledging Juneteenth and appealing for donations to support nonprofits that are supporting Black Lives Matters initiatives. And, you know, it's so rich and warming to see that, and other things that are happening in other corporations across the country is raising a level of engagement that I've never seen before in my lifetime. Our battles and victories are going to be ahead of us, but the war is not going to be over. So we must continue to fight and continue to stand up for injustices. And I would like to present on behalf of the mayor of Los Angeles a certification of recognition. And this proclamation reads as this: whereas on June 19th of every year, American looks to this day in 1865, on which Union General Gordon Granger led troops into Galveston, Texas, to announce the end of the Civil War and the insidious institution of slavery. Thousands of enslaved people in Texas, among the last to learn of their independence, tasted hard-won freedom for the first time. Whereas after this time, for decades, African Americans who journeyed out of the South seeking better lives brought Juneteenth celebrations with them. The thousands who settled in Los Angeles taught our state that America's struggle of independence did not end in 1776 or in 1865, but continues this day. And whereas General Granger's announcement of June 19, 1865 called for equality, the vision that has not been realized this day. This year, the celebration across the nation will be bittersweet. While African Americans will celebrate the essential meaning of Juneteenth, they are still joined by many Americans on the fight for social justice. Now, therefore, I, Eric Garcetti, Mayor of the City of Los Angeles, do hereby acknowledge Los Angeles City College African American administrators, faculty, staff, students, leaders for their exemplary leadership in hosting Black Lives Matter Town Hall 3, Juneteenth celebration, and the abolishment of slavery on June 18, 2020. Sealed by the City of Los Angeles, signed by Mayor Eric Garcetti of the City of Los Angeles, June 19, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We appreciate your support and certainly your efforts in getting that very well-needed recognition from Mayor Garcetti. And now I'm going to turn over the town hall back to Dr. Gallagher. And again, Dr. Gallagher, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Thelma. I have to tell you, sitting here, going through this this session with my colleagues, with all of you who I consider my LACC family. I really, really, really want to be serious and make sure that we continue this fight. It's critical. It's critical for us not to lose momentum. We have to continue to have discussions, to have actions that we're doing, to talk about the things that we expect, to actually put in writing the things that we will commit to ourselves, to you, to each other. This is so, so important. You know, Professor Clark said that it's critical for us to continue the fight. And Professor Selassie reminded us that the white supremacists who have dominated this country since its white beginnings are terrorists. We have to grapple with that, get our arms around that, and not just understand it, but really, really deeply and profoundly make sure that we are not a member of that terrorist group. And we do that by standing up to those terrorists. We have to stand up. We can't just be an ally. We can't just be a bystander. We can't just watch and see what happens. We have to get into it and do it. Not talk about it, not think about it, not say something about it, but actually do it. So I let you know last week that the management team is drafting an equity and ethics statement. And we will publish it to all of you so that you know what we are committing to you and what you can expect from us. This is meaningful. This is important. This can happen if we keep our momentum. We can be an example of what can be done. Nobody can do it like City College. I'm so happy that our social science faculty came today to help us to learn and to see and to grow. I thank you so much for coming. There were 170 of us here. This matters. When we stand together, I almost said if, but when we stand together, we can make the change happen. So another thing that we're doing, I just want to let you know a couple of things that we're working on right now so that you know that we are definitely action oriented. We've put a draft together of a new faculty position that we're going to be posting. It's for a director of race, equity, and social justice, because we want to focus on this. We want to make sure that our professional development goes around this, and we want it to be a faculty member. So they're working with other faculty to understand when something that's happening in our classrooms is not equitable. And that they'll also work with our classified staff and our administrators to make sure that everything we do in our interactions with our students and with each other is done in an equitable manner. That is critical for us to raise our level of awareness at this and to be very, very cognizant of how we're interacting with our students and with each other. And we're also working on right now the elements of a race equity and social justice center. To me, there's no place like LA City College to do that. We have such a rich history. We have such a great college. Our Black Faculty and Staff Association are back, and they're going to be coming back together and working with us and helping us to experience this great culture of African American and Black, not just history, but the actual culture. And I have had the opportunity since I was a child to experience the Black culture because of where I grew up and the areas that I lived in. So I don't know what it's like not to interact with a lot of different people, but there are many among us who don't. And we need to work together as a cohesive unit to make this happen. I said at the town hall a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to repeat it. I am the one who can make this happen for the college. I know that. I understand my responsibility, and I am committed to do it. I so appreciate the work of this group of people who have been helping put these town halls together, led by Dr. Day. Thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative of Dave Ford from Edison. He's putting money together so that we can invest more deeply into our Emoja program. I want to have the best Emoja program in the country. Whatever is the best Emoja program in the country, I want it better than that at City College. We're breaking out on this. We're going to make this the best place for our Black and African American students, faculty, and staff. So thank you so much for coming. I so appreciate it. I can't wait to do more with you, to learn more from you. I hope our faculty come back and do additional work with us, because this has been very, very enriching. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming. Just a quick reminder, next week we're still on Thursdays for our town halls, but it's going to be at 2 o'clock, because when I did the poll of everybody, that's what the majority of people wanted. So we'll be meeting at 2 o'clock. So thank you again to everyone who put this together and every one of you who attended. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you have a great day and a wonderful weekend. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye. Lillian, can you unmute everybody?
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Day.
you so much for coming.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Day.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Love you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Day.
Day.
Dr.
Bye,
Berry.
Cheryl.
Love you, sis. Professor Jackson.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank
I love
you.
it.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's
Thank
the
you.
puppy.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Where's Fida?
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Raiders. Yay. I love the Raiders, Michael. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you, Delmy. Bye, Fabian.
Bye.
Oh, bye, Regina. Good
Goodbye.
to see you.
Thank you.
Everyone, be safe. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
We're going to actually go through each strand.
Now that I'm home, there's more emergency hygiene going on.